Chinese President Xi Jinping has landed in Moscow for meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is the first time the Chinese leader has visited his neighbor and close strategic partner since Russia began its invasion of Ukraine.
And to know more about these meetings, including expected deals between the two countries, joining us now is the Washington Bureau correspondent for China Radio International, Kun Liu. Kun, thank you for joining us. Tell us, what will be the agenda of the meeting and what kind of deals can we expect to be signed between Russia and China in this one?
Well, thank you, Rolf and Ronnie, for having me on your program tonight to talk about this very important visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping. I think, as you reported, President Xi Jinping had just landed in Russia, and prior to his visit, we heard quite a lot about, the mission, what the Chinese side has to say about its policy vis-a-vis China-Russia relations, as well as for this meeting. So from the article by President Xi Jinping on Russian media, as well as from the remarks by China's foreign ministry spokesperson, I think the most important message we can get is that what they said, that this visit is a visit or a journey of, friendship and also cooperation and also peace. I think that's the most important message that the Chinese side perhaps wants to, get out to the international community. I think it's also important for me to point out that, this is President Xi Jinping's first overseas visit after China concluded its national, the annual gathering of its, top legislature, the National People's Congress, just a few days ago. And this actually shows, the significance that China attaches to this, bilateral relationship between China and Russia. As for the details, I don't want to, to be jumping into conclusion right now, but I think what we can predict, and perhaps we'll hear more from the Chinese Foreign Ministry tomorrow on the 21st, is that there are quite a few things I think, the two sides will, try to work out during any declaration that they may, release after the visit. The first thing is that they will reaffirm their commitment to the significance that they attach to this relationship. And the other thing is that I think, both leaders will try to set out new goals for the economic and trade relations between the two sides. And another thing is that they will perhaps set out some mechanism, to promote cultural as well as people-to-people exchanges between the two sides. And the last, but not least, a very important principle is that I think they will reaffirm their commitment to upholding multilateralism, especially, to work with each other to promote multilateralism in this very polarized world under the mechanisms such as, the United Nations, the BRICS organization, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, etc. So I think these are perhaps what I predict, will be said in any joint declaration by the two sides tomorrow or maybe later.
So we can definitely expect to see signings of more in the economic, trade, and energy sector in this meeting, especially considering that Russia has been boosting trades with China, especially in energy, since the Russia invasion to Ukraine began last year.
Again, I do not have, the details yet, but what I would say, or the figures that I would to give you is that, the trade volume. Well, China is Russia's biggest trading partner. The trade volume between the two sides back in 2013 was less than $90 billion. But last year, by the end of last year, it was more than $190 billion. Think about that. And I think, the two are, this trade relations are getting closer between the two sides. And of course, as you mentioned, China has a very big population and, China's economy is growing and China does consume a lot of energy from Russia. And the two have, big projects in the Siberian region, of, trying to get for China to get more energy supplies from Russia. And also in China, Russian commodities like Russian honey and, Russian chocolates are moving into the households of Chinese consumers. One thing I want to emphasize is that, just like any bilateral relations between China and any other country, like China and Indonesia, China and the trade relations between China and Russia, is, for China, is working towards, is helping China to achieve its goal to promote development and growth in the international community. China considers this very important. China considers trade and economic relations very important between any bilateral relations. And that's one of the reasons, why China has rolled out the Belt and Road Initiative. And as Indonesia have the Vision 2045. And I think China thinks the economic relationship, development in the international community is very important for prosperity. And in the end, it is important for promote growth and also stability and peace, in today's world. Ralph?
Now, Kun, you mentioned peace. So in the bigger scheme of things, in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war, how can we expect President Xi to somewhat broker a peace deal? And if so, what could that effort look like with this visit?
So, Ralph, this war between Russia and Ukraine have been going on for more than a year now. Thousands of lives have been lost from both sides, and people in Russia and Ukraine are all grieving for their loved ones, and they're in huge pain. This could and should have been avoided, but it wasn't. So there's a lot to think about that. As for China's position, I think China has repeatedly said that China considers the Ukraine issue a very complicated issue with long-time historical backgrounds. And China said, in the 12-point position paper it released a few days ago that, there is no easy solution to very complicated problems. And China will, this is China's general position. And the second thing is, I think, the Ukraine issue, the Ukraine crisis, in the end, is an issue between Russia and U.S.-led Western countries. And this is the essence of the issue. War is not in the interest of anybody. It is certainly not in the interest of China. So China thinks, that the end of the war will definitely be depending, on the efforts of, what I just said, Russia and U.S.-led Western countries. Quite a few people, including, international dignitaries, including experts, have proposed the idea of a future security architecture in the European continent. What China proposes is what they said in the Global Security Initiative is called common, comprehensive, and cooperative, sustainable security in the in any part of the world, just like in Asia. What does that even mean? That global security initiative, that goal means that the security concern of any stakeholder in the European continent, the security concern by Ukraine, by NATO countries, by Russia, should all be addressed if we want to solve this issue. Just like, in the South China Sea or in any other security issues, in Asia, all the stakeholders in the region should be addressed. The concerns of China, concerns of Indonesia, and the concerns of ASEAN, or any other country in the region should be addressed. The last thing I want to say is that I think China, the international, let's say Western mainstream media, and sometimes some Western experts or politicians have a fantasy that they condemn or criticize China for not taking the international view regarding the war in Ukraine. Well, the thing is, I think what they consider international is rather the viewpoint by, just a few U.S.-led Western countries, because I think the thing they have neglected, or the thing they chose to not see, is that, many countries or national governments in the global south have refrained from taking a side in the Ukraine crisis. For example, Indonesia or India or China have, refrained from taking a side in the Ukraine issue. I think that's definitely something, the Western society should think about and reflect upon, about, their position on this issue and their interest in this issue, Ralph.
So President Xi will reportedly head to Ukraine after Moscow and meet with President Zelensky. Tell us, what do you know more about this, and what kind of breakthrough can we expect as far as brokering for a peace deal is concerned?
Ralph, what we have is that, a few Western mainstream media, including especially the Wall Street Journal, has reported that after the meeting with Putin, President Xi Jinping will probably talk to Ukrainian President Zelensky. But the Chinese side has not confirmed that yet. Rather, they haven't provided any details regarding that phone call or any possible trip. Well, the thing is, China has immense interest in Ukraine, either in terms of infrastructure projects or in terms of trade, and the global inflation problem, the energy crisis, as well as the food crisis that happened after the start of the war, all have an impact on China. China is not certainly, the war is not, again, the war is not in China's interest, and China would love to see the end to the conflict. As well as, what China can do, I think, as you reported earlier during the show, that China, after, the efforts by Iraq and Oman, China has helped Saudi Arabia and Iran to restore normal diplomatic relations, after years of, really not talking to each other. I think that really shows Beijing's willingness, to help bring more peace to the international community. I think we can look forward to more details on that later. The one more thing before, I conclude talking this interview with you is that I think both Indonesian President Joko Widodo did a great job hosting, last year's G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. And I think both Indonesia and China have their own independent foreign policy. They will take care of their national interest first. And China really appreciates, the non-alignment position taken by the Indonesian government. I think both Indonesia and China are important stakeholders in the international stage. And I think in due time, both countries may have a role to play in bringing the war in Ukraine to an end.
Certainly hope so, and we'll end with that. Thank you very much, Kun, for your time and your insight on this one. Washington Bureau Correspondent for China Radio International, Kun Liu, joining us here on Asia Prime.